This time on Ask Rad Rat, we're talking about if skateboarding can give you flat feet, and we take a peek into the future of skateboarding to see what the next generation will be like. Let's get started. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, the channel where you can learn something new about skateboarding. I have this series, which is called Ask Rad Rat. I answer all of your questions. I also have a lot of other series. I teach tricks. I talk about skateboard history, other skateboard culture stuff like games. So subscribe to check out all of that stuff. But as of right now, let's get right into the questions. First one for today is from Juicy Josh, who says, "Hey Rad Rat, does skateboarding give you flat feet? I've been skateboarding for 10 years and the foot I use to pop my tricks has kind of lost the arch in my foot and is starting to hurt my knee. The foot that I don't use as often to pop tricks is fine. Is constantly popping tricks bad for your foot?" So I thought that was kind of, that stood out to me a lot because I have flat feet and I had knee problems. So I was thinking, like, is there really a connection there that we're both having this issue? For me, it's both feet, but it was kind of an interesting thing. So I did look it up, and I looked in the Medline Plus Medical Encyclopedia. Aging, injuries, or illness may harm the tendons and cause flat feet to develop in a person who has already formed arches. So if you had arches on both your feet and one started to flatten out, you know, if you have hurt it a lot, maybe you're doing a lot of big gaps and you're just smashing it down a lot, it is possible. It seems pretty unlikely that just skating around popping tricks is going to do it. But if you're injuring it, you're pushing it way too hard, you're crushing your feet under huge drops, then it is possible. So I don't know. I don't think that's my issue. I think I was just kind of always like that. But yeah, I don't think regular skating around is going to do that. But, you know, look into some arch support, Dr. Scholl stuff maybe. Next question is from Sergio, who says, "Hey Rad Rat, what is the bean plant? I mean, is it a no comply to grab or just a boneless variation if you try it at flat ground?" So the bean plant is this trick right here on my shirt. So the name, as far as we know, it's hard to really prove this, but it's a boneless with a lean grab. So he's grabbing on the heel side of the board, which is called a lean. As long as you don't tweak it, it's called a lean. And so boneless, lean, bean plant, that is kind of how that name most likely came about. The only thing is the exact technique. Do you grab and then pop it up like a boneless? Do you like no comply it into your hand? Those are both a boneless. It's just kind of like, you know, the old school way was more with popping it off of curbs and everything. Nowadays, we just call them both the same thing. So if you do, you know, no comply off of a curb, catch it into your hand and turn it into a bean plant, that's still a bean plant. Do it on flat, just like a, you know, old school boneless, then that's also a bean plant. But you did have a second question. Is tightness of trucks really matter with pressure tricks? I mean, is it possible on a loose truck like Day One's front one? So I did have a trick tip for pressure flips, and I talk about that to a degree, and it does have a pretty big effect. So if your trucks are super tight, you can put a ton of pressure on the board, which is the name of the trick. You can just kind of pop it down, and all that pressure will like unload, and the board will flip, right? But if your trucks are really loose, you can still do it. The technique is a little bit different though. Instead of putting all this pressure on the board, you kind of stay more balanced. And as you pop it, like right before you leave, then you put the pressure on at the last second. And that way you aren't turning as you're trying to set up and stuff like that. If they're super loose, day one style, it's probably still possible, but it's going to get really difficult. All right, next question from Brendan. Where do you think skating will be in the next 10 years? It seems that looking back is the new going forward, to me at least, and I was wondering your take on it. So one of the things, this is going to tie in with the next question as well, so stay tuned for a little bit more in depth on part of it, but I think we're getting to a point where we're reaching the best in certain categories. So you have like Nigel Houston doing crazy rails, you got Jaws doing giant gaps and stuff, and we're getting to a point where as we go forward, we're not going to see 100% progression in every category like we have been so far. You know, like the biggest gaps in the 90s aren't that impressive these days, except for a few. But, you know, for the most part, every category has gotten better. And I think at some point we're going to max some stuff out. We're going to get to the highest drops you can ever do. We're going to do the longest rails you can ever do. And we're going to just max out the rest of the categories too, if that makes any sense. So it's not necessarily going to be like, everybody's 100% better than they used to be. Jaws might be the best gap guy ever, and we're not going to see him topped for another 20 years. Someone might start to match him, you know what I mean? I think we're going to reach that point coming up relatively soon. But I think one of the biggest trends we're going to start to see is more like have it your own way type of skating, where people do their own stuff. It's not about, every part has to have a line that starts with a 360 flip. Everyone has to have at least one handrail in their part. It'll be more like everyone just has their own style and does their own thing. I think that's the biggest trend we're going to see going forward. Exactly what tricks, I don't know, but it's going to be more of everything. You're really into no comply stuff. There's going to be some guy who's doing a ton of no comply stuff who gets popular, that kind of thing. So that's kind of where I see things going in the future. You had a second question. Also, have you read any of the stuff on Slap about you? No, I've not. I had someone send me a DM and was like, hey, sorry about all the stuff they're saying over there. And it's like, you know what? I don't need any of that. This is my hobby. I do it for fun. I do like an hour or two of content every month. Not everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to mispronounce words. I'm going to have a opinion you disagree with and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. If you think I'm wrong, you think I, am misleading people by having such a dumb opinion about something, that's fine. I just don't care. I don't have time for that. I'm just here to do something that I enjoy doing, and I'm not going to dig into all the negative stuff out there. If you don't like the channel, you think I'm terrible, just go away. I'm not forcing you to be here. The last question is from Ben W., who asks, do you think the next generation of skateboarders will grow up to be better than the top pros today? When I was rewatching Photosynthesis the other day, I came to realize the talent of today has surpassed the level of talent from the early 2000s. Now it's common to see average Joes who put out better footage on Instagram than pro video parts back in the day. This is obviously expected with progression, but will it happen again? I know the rails and gaps will always get bigger, but will the best video part today eventually be trumped by a 14-year-old on an average day 20 years from now? Will we eventually reach a peak where the best will always stay the best? I think that's an interesting question, and it is possible because there is human limits to stuff. I have a series that I've been working on about that. The biggest gaps, the biggest rails and stuff, there are human limits that we'll eventually get really, really close to, and no one's ever going to be able to break those limits as people, right? So it is possible that we're going to get to the highest level in technical skating, the highest level in, how much air you can get on vert. All that type of stuff is eventually going to be maxed out, but how far away are we from that? So something I wanted to look at was sports. Take a look at basketball. You can debate whether Michael Jordan would still be the best player today. He's about to run out onto the court in 1996 and he suddenly teleports to today and he's playing. Would he still be the best? Maybe. He'd at least be really far up there, And so the skill level in basketball hasn't really improved quite as much in the last 20 to 30 years. And the stuff that they have improved, I think, has a lot to do with stats and how they monitor things and then specialized training for specific things and that type of stuff more than just talent has gone up. But if you go back far enough, you will eventually be the best basketball player in the world, right? Depending on how good you are now will depend how far back you have to go. But, if you played in college and you're really, really good, maybe go back to like the 50s and you'd be the best pro in the world. If you like to shoot hoops in your driveway once a month, go back to like a week after basketball was invented and you'd be the best in the world. Never played it before, go the day before it was invented and you'd at least know the rules before anyone, right? Like you could always be the best in the world at some point. And so skateboarding is like that too. And I had a video, it was one of my first videos about could you be pro back in the 80s if you're a street skater. You could go back far enough where stuff you do would be brand new and blow everyone's mind and be the best in the world. So with that in mind, like where are we in that process? How far could we keep going before we've reached the limits? And so I wanted to take a look at with basketball a little bit. So basketball was invented in 1891. And I think, the skill level went up and up and up and up until it kind of plateaued, like I said, maybe in the 90s or something like that. So it took almost 100 years, or 90 years maybe, for people to master the game. Before that, you could always learn from the guys before you. You could see their techniques and improve on them. It got to a point where techniques were kind of mastered. Like this is the right way to do it. It's been tested for decades. This is by far the best way to defend this type of thing and all that type of stuff. And in skateboarding, we're still in that learning stage. You know, we see someone else do a really big handrail and suddenly realize that that's possible. And now a bunch of people are going to do it. And now we see their technique. We can see how people can flick a trick so that they catch it, and it's not just mobbed and landed on flat. You know, we learn from the techniques of other people, and we can build our own skating. And so we're still in that phase for a while. If it took basketball 90 or 100 years to get to the level where it's basically mastered, then it would take, you know, maybe 2050, 2060, something like that before we're at that same point in skateboarding. You know, but there is a human limit, and there will be a point where people are really, really good, but this guy just had more talent than anyone who's around right now. You know, this video part from 10 years back is better than everything that's brand new. That is possible, and I do think that'll happen, but that time period is still kind of a guess. More people play basketball than they do skateboard, so, you know, does that factor in all that type of stuff? I don't know for sure, but there is definitely a point where improvement is kind of impossible. There's still room for being creative, building new types of obstacles, you know, mastering different kinds of tricks, doing things in a new way. But as far as just pure skill, pure like biggest gap, biggest handrail, you know, most tricks on a ledge or whatever, that stuff will eventually get maxed out. So those are my thoughts about that. Let me know what you think about that below. And if you have any questions for next time, go to radratvideo.com and submit a question form. There's Ask Radrat right on the homepage. Just fill out that form. It'll email it to me, and I will consider it for a future show. But until then, watch some more of these videos. I have a lot of other stuff about skateboarding culture here on the channel, so check that out. And tap my logo right here to subscribe and keep up to date with everything I do here on the channel. Thank you for watching.